I'm gonna press record now. That's cool shit, man.
Yeah.
So, Ricky Warren, welcome to the Wellness Academy podcast. Thank you very, very much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you on the show. So we literally just a moment ago pressed record, and like I said, hold that thought, right? So we're going to hold that particular thought for a tiny bit longer. I only recently, due to a friend of yours, a previous podcast guest of mine, Tim Gray, kind of got put on to you as an individual and what you're all about, and was excited to get the opportunity to sit on the podcast and, if nothing else, find out how you ended up where you are doing what you're doing, what it is that you're super passionate about outside of what we see of you on Instagram, kind of how you got to where you are doing what you do today.
That's a lot of questions. I started martial arts at about 7 years old. I was one of those hyperactive kids, had a lot of energy. And so my dad put me into judo and jiu-jitsu. Mm-hmm. And then going forward from there, for the next 20 years after that, I practiced boxing, Wing Chun, Kung Fu. I got a brown belt in that, wrestling, Thai boxing, you name it. Did these all for at least 5 years each, some of them for 10 years or more. Then it got to the point where I did a biology degree at university, went to work in marketing because I wanted to make some money, work in an office, wear a suit, all that kind of stuff. Then I wasn't really feeling satisfied with what I was doing for work. Didn't feel like I was actually achieving anything apart from just cycling around yearly budgets and numbers. So I left that and started doing coaching, what I've been doing all my life. And I actually feel so much more happy and settled in what I'm doing because I'm actually helping humanity. I'm contributing something, and don't make anywhere near as much money as I used to. But my time is mine. I run my own business. Now I qualify coaches. So I'm the coach's coach. I've trained world-class, Hall of Fame world champions and athletes in UFC and CrossFit and things like that. So I'm just really, really into the depth of what I do. And I'm loving it. So it's my journey so far. I think someone asked me the other day, what's your agenda? I don't really have an agenda. I just want to share. Yeah. But I don't have an agenda. I really just want to share the joy of what I found in training. And especially since I found yoga, or I looked deeper into yoga, the benefits of that as well.
Who are the UFC guys that you've worked with?
Namely, Cody No Love and Uriah Faber. I went to their gym and I did a little mini workshop with them on some mobility and stuff like that.
That's cool.
And they're both like multi-world champions.
Oh yeah, I definitely know who Cody and Uriah are. Used to be a massive fan of Uriah. He was a big dog.
He was, yeah. Some other guys from K1 kickboxing and things like that. And I've also coached the coaches in Tiger Muay Thai in Thailand, Phuket Top Team. So go around teaching the coaches about mobility and movement and how to incorporate better movement and rehabilitation into their sport. So I'm not, I don't go around teaching them Thai boxing. They're Thai and they're legends, but I know how they use their bodies for their arts, and I know how to help them optimize their movements and how to keep longevity of their health, So yeah, go around the world teaching that kind of stuff. And it's just joyful. It's just beautiful life to live, and really happy, yeah.
What about the CrossFitters?
The CrossFitters, there's a few that have done the games, but they haven't really won anything in particular. So they're not really big names like that. And that's an area that... Say again?
Try me. That is in... Like,
I don't even know...
I'm into my CrossFit and my day job, so I'm not doing it at the moment. We are April the 2nd, 2020, in case anyone listens to this podcast in the future and listens back. We are, 3 or 4 weeks now into this coronavirus pandemic, like really big time here in the UK. Like, we'll touch on it, but you're kind of lucky to have got back into the country, I think.
Mate, I was stuck in Bali. And I tell you what, the people were trying to get out. There was not a lot of information coming out in Bali about what was happening. So everyone was just carrying on partying until the middle of March.
Wow.
And yeah, we didn't have any idea what was going, because you're on holiday or you're traveling, you're not really looking at world news. And then little rumors would go around about Corona this and Corona that. And then all of a sudden, the UK government recalled all of the citizens. And everybody that was from Europe and Australia and stuff started panicking and trying to get flights home. And all the flights were dropping like flies. They were getting cancelled. And I was there thinking, well, I'm in paradise. I'm going to get knocked down either way. Might as well stay here. But then I started to think a bit harder, and I was like, actually, I don't know what they'll do if they lock us down here, and what, how dire the situation might get, how long it might be, how difficult it might be for me to get home. So I took the government advice, and I've got pretty much the last plane back, because the day after I had to go to Singapore to Dubai, and Dubai to London. And Singapore and all these other countries, they'd already locked their borders to anyone coming in. So they're not giving any visas to anyone coming in. But if you transit through the airport, you don't need a visa, because you just go gate to gate. And the day after I got my flight, they even cancelled transits. So they said nobody can come through this airport. So I literally got one of the last flights out. So I was quite lucky for that, yeah.
Before this virus obviously put us in first and foremost, of course, there was the social distancing, which was essentially the same thing that we're doing now, but without the hard and fast rule. Obviously, the British public, generally speaking, proved that the government needs to tell you what to do rather than just giving you advice. And then I was actually, like, my day job is to teach karate and kickboxing. So I've been doing martial arts since the same kind of age that you were doing it. So I've always been into watching UFC, but then training wise, the main thing that I've done probably for the last 3 or 4 years is CrossFit. So whilst they might not have won anything, I would be surprised if the CrossFit athletes that you've worked with, I don't know who they are.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know their last names, to be honest. I'll have to go and give you the Instagrams of them. One of them, I went to an event with, I think it was Royal Navy
Royal Docks
cadets or whatever it was. No. The actual Navy guys.
Oh, okay.
Actually, the actual naval base in it was, I don't even know where it was. I'm really bad right now because earlier, but it was quite, maybe it was near Dover or something. But there was a Navy base camp, and we went to do a workout and get tested by their trainers. And there was me, this CrossFitter guy, Sean, I think his name was, and Seb Eubank, the boxer, a couple of other people. And we did some fitness testing and stuff with them down there. That was quite interesting. I'm really bad because I don't even remember the brand we did it for. But yeah, so I did some training with him afterwards. And but yeah, CrossFit. CrossFit's an area that I really like the exercises that they do, but I don't really like the fact that they put too much focus on endurance and not on form, because often the form you see is terrible. It's sacrificed just to get the reps out. And in terms of my sport and what I do, I don't think that's a good thing necessarily, because I see so many injuries coming out of it. So CrossFit as a discipline, in terms of the things that it combines, cardio, gymnastics, weightlifting, I think they're all great disciplines individually, but to combine them and just focus on reps and not on form, it's a bit of a dangerous thing. Kind of goes against my principles of training. So I wouldn't necessarily do CrossFit style WODs, but I'll definitely use all of the movements and train all of the different styles that they do in CrossFit.
I think it's interesting that like any CrossFit gym that I have trained at, the coach has always impressed upon the members in the class itself that movement patterns, like discipline of form and the correct movement patterns are paramount. Like, it's definitely not this idea that you go into a CrossFit gym and they'll teach you kipping pull-ups before you do strict pull-ups. Like, at the nearest CrossFit gym to me, if you haven't got decent form on a kipping pull-up, you're not doing them. And yes, you might get a kipping pull-up before you get a strict pull-up, but that's rightly or wrongly only because somebody would be significantly struggling to get the strict strength involved. So for example, like, my girlfriend can't do a strict pull-up, but she can now string together 2 or 3 kipping pull-ups. But again, she'll only do them with focusing on the best form that is involved in the kipping pull-up. So I know that you can argue that itself is not correct, but to give CrossFit its due, I agree with you that the form isn't always great, but that isn't necessarily down to the coach. That's down to the fact that the people don't listen. Do you know what I mean? And I can testify to that.
But you're slightly confusing what I'm saying, in the sense that there are different levels you can discuss the quality of movement on. You're talking about technique, and I'm not talking about technique. I'm talking about biomechanical symmetry and accuracy.
Oh, okay.
So if you're doing kipping pull-ups and you can do 15 apparently perfect kips, you can't tell, unless you've got a very, very trained eye, if the left shoulder is doing more work than the right, and if the left scapula is popping up every time. And if you train that movement pattern 15 times every day, you're going to create dysfunction. And this is the problem with endurance-based training. In my opinion, we shouldn't be mixing high skill, high mobility, high strength-based moves with endurance. They're completely opposite things. If you're going to run, then run. That's an endurance sport. If you're going to do snatch with 80% of your max, you should not be doing endurance with that. You should be doing 1 or 2 reps at the most and making that movement perfect. Because every one that you do wrong, you're going to mess yourself up. And that's the problem there, is encouraging people to use a light enough weight that they can get away with doing bad movements and endurance, but they don't. They keep pressuring the weight, and they shouldn't do that. It's either endurance or it's strength. And you can train those separately, and there's a blurred line between, but trying to bring those two close together is a dangerous thing. And that's my qualm with it. Really. It's like, you shouldn't be throwing weights above your head with one shoulder popping up all the time, not even 3 times. You should be perfecting your snatch every single time to land perfectly correct in every single time. And the only way you can do that is by focusing on each movement one at a time and taking the time with it, breathing, neuromuscular control, conscious movement. And unfortunately, when you're struggling and you're breathing and you've just done 100 double unders and 50 kipping pull-ups, your snatch is not going to be on point. I don't care who you are. No Olympic lifter goes into his maximum lift having done all of that work before. He's prepped himself for 2 hours just for that one movement. So
it's interesting you should say that. I had, do you know the name Michaela Breeze?
Yeah, I've heard of her, yeah.
Michaela Breeze is former Olympic and Commonwealth Games athlete for Great Britain and Wales, respectively. She was on the podcast recently and said exactly the same thing as you have just said. I listened to a podcast that a guy called Chris Williamson hosted, so the Modern Wisdom podcast. He had on a guy called Ryan Fisher, who's quite a famous CrossFit athlete. And he was discussing like overhead squats, saying that overhead squats should not be included. Like, so there's a famous CrossFit workout that's run 400 meters, 15 overhead squats. It's like 4 or 5 rounds for time. And yeah, like I've heard a significant percentage of people talking about how some of the principles of CrossFit are destined to have people fail in terms of physical longevity. You're not the only one.
Yeah. I think this, somebody comes in for their first karate lesson. What are you going to have them doing? You're just going to have them working on stances.
Yeah,
and
jab straights and front kicks at the most. Yeah.
They're not going to be doing flying kicks and spinning roundhouses.
No.
And they're definitely not going to be doing those for reps.
Yeah.
So you walk into a CrossFit class and immediately something's gone above your head. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. If you're even going on your hands against a wall, ridiculous.
Oh, really?
You haven't even checked. Well, if you haven't checked each individual for their ability to extend their wrist at 90 degrees. If they can't do that, how are they even going to balance their elbow on top of their wrist in a handstand? If you haven't checked that their elbow doesn't hyperextend, or that they can actually fully extend it to 180, if you don't know what their shoulder can do, if you don't know if their scapulars are strong enough, why are you loading these joints without even knowing that they're capable of doing these movements? But that you're at the same time, you're having a conversation with someone that's specialized in biomechanics. So I'm going to have qualms about that. But
okay, so I've got a couple of queries that I'm super keen to hear your opinion on this then. So let's go with the first thing that you said. Do you know who Ross Edgley is?
Saying all these names, but I don't know who they are. I feel like
that's cool. So Ross Edgley, he became more universally known. I think it was last year that he swam around Great Britain.
Oh yeah.
So more people, I say the name, they don't know him. Then I say,
yeah.
Do you know the guy that swam around Great Britain? And then they go, oh yeah. Okay. So he swam around Great Britain, and in the YouTube blogs that Red Bull posted of his journey around the country, and in any of the podcasts that he did post swim, he was discussing the ideas. He's got a book called The World's Fittest Book, right? Long story short, within the book, he champions the idea that you can combine endurance training and strength training, which obviously that's been widely believed to be, you cannot get the most impetus out of your strength training or your endurance training if you try and combine the two. So CrossFit goes against that, obviously, and Ross Edgley champions this idea. Like, where do you sit on that principle?
I mean, you quote him as championing that, but there's always a context to what he said.
True.
And I don't think he would disagree that you shouldn't be doing snatches for endurance. You see what I mean?
So yeah, more along the lines of not in terms of a safety and a picking something technically challenging like a snatch, more just the principle of you and I might have made a leap in my head here from 1 to 2 in terms of interested in your opinion, but because the belief has been so longly held that if you want to get stronger, you would limit your cardio. If you want to have fantastic cardio, you wouldn't be able to maximize your strength gains. I was just curious to see what you would have to say on that.
No. So you also, don't get me wrong. I didn't say don't mix the two in your program. Okay. I said not in one workout, because you're trying to work, and especially not in one movement. In one workout, even yes. If you want to do sprints and then strength, okay, as long as you're capable and you've conditioned for that. But mixing a strength and skill base. So remember what I said, all movements can be scored in different areas. How much mobility do you need for the movement? How much strength do you need and power? How much speed? How much skill, neuromuscular control and skill, and how much endurance, right? So if you tally all these things up, a push-up is a very low skill movement. Doesn't need much balance, needs quite a lot of strength if you consider it against other moves. Can be done for endurance without being too risky, because it's low skill and because it doesn't require too much strength. But then if you do something like a snatch, it's different. So, and the mobility of a push-up is not high, but the mobility for a handstand push-up is.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So suddenly it changes the risk of doing that move. And
okay.
The other thing, I mean, there's things about programming which are always going to come under opinion. And but when you look at the science of it, endurance-based workouts use a completely different system in the body to anaerobic or strength-based workouts. Now, what makes strong people able to continue using their strength for longer periods is the anaerobic system. It's their ability, you know, the OBLA, the onset of blood lactate accumulation.
Okay.
The lactate in our muscles that builds up the lactic acid, we can tolerate that for a longer time than other people. So more and more lactic acid is building up, but our muscle can still work under that condition. Whereas other people's muscles just shut off and they lose the strength. There's also the ability to hold time under tension, right? Or tension under time, if you want, in that sentence.
Yeah.
So scientifically, the body is using different systems and a different method of, even breathing is different. The way you breathe when you exert strength, the way you use your conscious mind, it's all different. And to switch from one mode to the other is very challenging, but it can be done. But I would say that's for very high level athletes or very highly conditioned or experienced trainers, people that are training for a long time.
Okay.
You can't get your average Joe doing it. But if you combine all that into one movement, so you get high skill, high mobility, high strength movement like snatch, and you try to demand the aerobic system to work with that, it's just a mess. Like it's asking for trouble, you know? So it's scientifically, I just don't think it makes sense.
Cool. No, I appreciate that I appreciate you helping me understand the flaws in my question. Like if we say that, do you know what I mean? So the other thing that it made me think of, I had a gentleman on the podcast named Dave Durant. Dave Durant is, you know that one. And one of the things that he was talking to me about, again, without too much context of the conversation, was the positive benefits of spending time in a handstand. So if we take what Dave Durant had said, and there are positive benefits to spending time in a handstand, and we factor in what you've just said, that, should we say, let's say me personally, there may be unknown difficulties that would flare up if I spend too much time in a handstand. If somebody was excited about and had a goal of, I want to be able to hold a 10-second handstand, like freestanding handstand, what are the kinds of things that you would do to prehab or bulletproof your body to make sure that you're not going to screw yourself up by spending a minute in a handstand against a wall to practice for a 10-second free handstand?
Yeah. And so again, what he said there, I don't disagree with it, but it's entirely contextual, because and you correct me if I'm wrong, you had the conversation, but I'm pretty sure what he would have been referring to are the postural benefits of being
100%. 100%.
And second of all, I don't know if he alluded to it or not, but inverting the body activates the parasympathetic nervous system and can calm the body down. So in yoga, inversions are used for that purpose. But remember, you can invert yourself without having to use your hands. You can do a headstand.
Yeah.
So the principle is that a handstand is very difficult because of the skill and the mobility required in the shoulders. Because your average person does not need that level of mobility, the 180 degrees flexion in the shoulder. The average person doesn't need that, and the average person doesn't have that. And when I say that, I mean without messing around with the scapula. So, you know, most people need to put something in the shelf or whatever, but most people aren't throwing weight or holding their weight above their head on a daily basis. So the main thing, if you're going to do handstands, is to make sure that, put it this way, you want to do a handstand in a straight line so that it's biomechanically efficient for you, it's good posture, and it's symmetrical on the weight on your hands and everything. If you can't do that standing the right way up, you definitely can't do it with all your body weight loaded on your hands upside down. And the point is, people are trying to go upside down without being able to do it the right way up. So as long as your body is able to produce position the right way up, then go upside down, fine, and learn how to balance that way. But you shouldn't be trying to do a handstand if your body is not prepared for that position. So mobility is the highest requirement, because, again, if I break the handstand down, it's a I wouldn't say high mobility because there's harder handstands than just a normal one, but let's say high mobility, average to high skill, medium to low strength move. You don't need a huge amount of strength for handstand. You just need good stability in the joints, and it's medium to high balance, medium to high mobility because of what's needed and versus what's common and what isn't, and low strength. So you don't need to work on strength for handstand. You don't need to work on even balance that much. The balance doesn't happen because you don't have the mobility, because you're trying to force posture through different joints while you're upside down, because you can't do it. So you go upside down like this, and then you're trying to change it while you're upside down, but the joints won't move, and then your balance is going all over the place. If you just go up like that, everything will just align, and it's easy.
Okay.
So it's So mobility, I'd say, is the first thing to work on.
So the fact that when I was training regularly, should we say this time last year, the fact that I was okay at handstand walking in a CrossFit workout, but couldn't hold a handstand for 5 seconds, you wouldn't be agreeing that I should be doing that then, Ricky?
No, because, I mean, you'll know as well, when you're doing handstand walks, when you're going forwards, you're probably going much further on one hand than the other. You know this, everybody does this. When you actually walk forwards, you depend on one arm more than the other, and you kind of do it lopsided. Your feet will be doing God knows what in the air. I know for sure they're not together like this, right? So the thing is, that's not a handstand walk. That's walking on your hands in whatever, and your body's doing whatever it's doing. And a handstand is a handstand.
Okay.
So, and even a handstand can be whatever, you know? Handstand is just being on your hands. If you're talking about the technical straight pencil handstand, that's what it is, Olympic handstand. If you're talking about walking on your hands, that's walking on your hands. And there's different levels to it, you know? But just like I'm saying, all the viewers of this should be aware, the higher the level of skill involved and the higher the level of mobility required, if you don't have that skill or mobility, you're asking for trouble if you go high endurance on those movements.
So if I want to, or if I already am doing handstands, and I'm listening to this and I'm going, oh yeah, okay, like I need to work on actually being able to do this properly, stood up. Can you give us your 1 to 3 favorites or whatever in terms of mobility exercises? Like, what should I be doing to prepare myself better?
Well, you can do, I mean, it's a bit hard for me to show them sitting here, but you can look up shoulder flexion exercises on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
So anything that improves shoulder flexion, look up those. And then there's one called hollow body.
Yeah.
Or dish in gymnastics, it's called. And this is to strengthen the pelvic floor and the lower abdominals so that you can correctly position the hips in posterior tilt. Because if the hips are in anterior tilt, the lower back starts bending with that, and your legs will go over your head. And also, if you're in a handstand and your shoulders aren't aligned like this, let's say they're like this, yeah, because you haven't got 180. So you're kind of like this, handstanding like this. If you look like that, your legs are just going to come straight back down here because of gravity. So what your legs do to balance this is this. Yeah. Does that make sense? Yeah. And that's why you have this banana back, is because you don't have this 180 angle here. If you can just create 180 here, you would find your feet need to come back here. Okay. So and just for clarity, and I would encourage people to watch me talking to you for sure, versus just listening. And I will make the video available on YouTube. When you want to create the 180 here, is that at the shoulder that you're referring to? Yeah. Okay. At the shoulder, yeah. Because I do the banana back thing and my feet come over. And I have got a pelvic tilt that I need to fix. So the shoulder flexion exercises are going to improve your level of shoulder flexion and give you a straighter line from your arms to your back. Once that happens, that's the root and the anchor of the whole thing. then your hips can do what they want, to be honest, because there's variations of handstands.
Yeah.
So you can adjust your shoulders accordingly. So you got to think the first joint from the floor upwards is the wrist.
Yeah.
And that's where you feel all the effort in handstand, in the wrist. Because that's where all the control is coming from. And the elbow needs to be able to stay straight so that you can transfer the load into the shoulders, because you don't want to be holding handstand here on the triceps. It's not efficient. So you straighten the arms and it goes into the shoulder. And the shoulder just needs to be mobile enough to transfer that through the whole spine. And that's it. And then after that, the legs can be doing a multitude of things. It can be rhomboid, diamond, tuck, straddle, straight, split, stag, etc.
So your training background, like you said, was predominantly martial arts.
Yeah.
You left working, shall we say, a kind of quote unquote corporate job to transfer into coaching. When did you really start developing the skill set that you've got, that you showcase across your Instagram, with the ability to do the iron cross and all of the crazy cool stuff that you're doing on there? Do you know what I mean? When did that start turning up for you?
Calisthenics around 10 years ago. So even while I was in the office job, I was doing it because I was just been training all my life. Yeah. So it's one of those things that calisthenics is a street sport. It started in prisons, actually, in the US. And then they started doing muscle ups and stuff on the bars. And then as that kind of came over to the UK was very, very instrumental in developing the calisthenics scene. There's a lot of moves that were invented in our parks in London that now they use all over the world. And there's a lot of phrases we use, and just a lot of the subculture of calisthenics came from here. Like we're very well known in London for calisthenics, because in other parts of the world, it's too gymnastic-y. Like if you look at the way Russians in particular do calisthenics, some of the strongest motherfuckers out there are the Russians. But they all train in gymnastics gyms, and they're all just doing static holds. There's none of the freestyle 360s and the one-arm pull-ups with the steps and all the swag. All the swag and the entertainment value and the making it more fun, that came from here. And then we used to travel to LA, we used to travel to New York, Spain, Germany, Italy, and we'd meet other athletes that do this. But the biggest concentrated collection of people doing freestyle calisthenics for at least a couple of years or a few years was in London. And I ran the first calisthenics event, as far as I'm aware, in all of Europe or most of the world, where we had 500 people attend in Primrose Hill. And it was free to attend. And we just put all these portable bars up, and we had some competitions. And I got some people to give us some free parallettes and some stuff to give away, because I used to work in events and conferencing, so I knew how to set it all up. So I said, look, you want to sponsor this? Give us some stuff to give away, and you can come and sell your stuff or give some leaflets out or whatever. And we just did a couple of those events, and there was all these different crews in different parts of UK, like breakdancing crews, calisthenics crews. All of that is dismantled now. Everybody just trains and mixes together and does what they do.
Okay.
But that whole element of calisthenics, we are self-taught. We learnt that on the street in the freezing cold on equipment that was outside that wasn't even good enough. And in the last few years, they've started putting up actual calisthenics parks. But we were learning on really bad equipment, bad conditions. And that's why we can do what we do anywhere. Like you give me a lamppost of any thickness. If you go to like a pole artist, like a pole dancer, they need a 3.8 diameter inch pole to do all of their moves, because that's what they train on. That's their standard. But you can give me any thickness of bar in any direction. It can be diagonal, it can be up, straight, horizontal. I can do something on it because we trained on the street, you know. We didn't learn with professionals. And when we learned how to do what we do, after a while, we started getting pains and different things because we weren't efficient at what we were doing. And then I turned my eye to mobility, rehabilitation, efficiency, and I started learning a whole lot more about that. And then I kind of crafted after doing so much research into sports science, doing loads of qualifications, sports massage therapy, osteopathic manipulation, I can crack people's necks. And I don't do that because it's not my interest. I did it for the study.
Mm-hmm.
So to understand the anatomy of the body in such detail that someone's doing a planche and in a straddle and one of their legs is up there and one's down there, I could correct that. Someone's doing a handstand and they're slightly like this to the side, I can correct it because it's about biomechanics. Now, when you combine biomechanics and efficiency and joint health with any sport, you can make more efficient that movement. So if you're sprinting, if you're boxing, whatever it is, you're using certain joints in certain patterns. And if you make those efficient movements, you get more power, more speed, more leverage, more strength, more everything. And also you maintain the longevity of the health of the joints.
I've got a very specific question for you now then, and it'd be super cool if you could answer this actually, because it's always intrigued me. And again, feel free to do what you've done so far and and very kindly let me know how shit my actual question is. But you know, like for example, let's say I'm chambering for a round kick or a side kick or a hook kick or a spin kick, but I've got that side on chamber position. Do you ever remember seeing, I think it was the second of the new X-Men films?
When you say, because I used to do a bit of tricking, I just want to double check. When you say chambering, you mean pulling the knee up and cocking up the hip, ready to extend, yeah? Yeah.
That chamber
so
position.
Pull the knee up, yeah.
So I don't know if you ever remember, and it's always stuck with me. So whoever stunt doubled Jennifer Lawrence for her role as Mystique in X-Men Days of Future Past, X-Men First Class, like those films with James McAvoy as Professor X, right? It was the second film. There's a scene in the film where the stunt double is literally straight-bodied, chambers her leg, for a side kick, and side kicks and holds the opponent against a wall by the neck in a side kick position, right? And
That's
it always, yeah, exactly, right? That's why it's always stood out to me. Because if I want a side kick to the head, you can guarantee that I'm leaning back, okay?
Yeah.
So, and it's always made me curious. Those people that can stand up straight and kick head height, particularly with control. Think Neo in the Matrix at the end of the first Matrix film. You know what I mean? Is that a strength thing? Is it a flexibility thing? Is it both? You know, because as I get older, I find it harder and harder to stand up straight when I kick. And I want to be a great example for my students.
Yeah.
What am I not working on?
There's quite a few things I can say about that. So the first thing is, if you want to see a beautiful living example of what you're saying, Israel Adesanya.
Yeah, man.
Right? Now, the reason this guy is so hard to deal with is because he'll be at punching distance and suddenly his foot will come out of nowhere and smack you around the head. And he can stand completely upright while doing it. You can't see the telltales in his movement because his shoulders will be square and his foot will come up.
Yeah.
And the reason is because he has very, very mobile hips. And mobility is a combination of having full or maximal range of motion plus neuromuscular control. So if you can do the passive splits on the floor, it doesn't mean you can hold your leg up at 180 degrees to the ceiling. It doesn't mean that.
Yeah.
So the thing is, because the floor is holding your feet apart, it doesn't mean you actually have the ability to resist or create tension in that range of motion.
That's a good point.
So end range conditioning is where we condition the joints to be able to operate in their end ranges. And that's not flexibility, that's real mobility, that's real control. So what's happening here is where your hip, where your femur, the top bone of your leg, inserts into the acetabellum, which is the hip capsule, it can do whatever it can do. It's a ball and socket.
Mm-hmm.
If your hip can do this, then you can kick like that without leaning back. If your leg can only do this, then your body will have to compensate with other joints to get the leg high. And so what you're doing is you're shifting the weight onto the back hip, and you're using the spine and other joints to compensate for a lack of mobility in the actual hip capsule.
Yeah.
But if your hip was mobile enough, you could do a full split standing and not even move your shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
And
Do you
Israel
ever know a girl
Adesanya,
called
like I
Chloe
said,
Bruce?
Chloe Bruce, of course, legend.
That's
So
amazing.
Look at the machine gun kicks that she does. She can
Yeah.
only do machine gun kicks because she has amazing hip mobility.
So
But
Chloe
the thing
Bruce
is,
used to be, talking now you're on about like, there were calisthenics crews, kind of like breakdancing crews. So a very good friend of mine is a chap named Ryan Phillips. He used to be in a breakdancing crew called Trinity Warriors from here in the Midlands. But at the same time he was in Trinity Warriors, he was in a martial arts performance group, which was basically the UK XMA team. And it was Ryan, a lad named Danny Ball, which incidentally is my name, a lad named Liam Richards, and then Chloe and a young lady called Sammy Smythe at the time. So Ryan was good friends with Chloe. They competed around the world together.
Yeah, the whole XMA thing is where tricking came from, isn't it?
Yeah, man.
XMA came from musical forms. My cousin used to do that when we were really young.
Oh,
my cousin would sit in the split. He'd sit in the splits and we'd watch cartoons together at 8 years old. Cool.
So and, do you ever remember Michael Chatterantabut? Does that name ring a bell?
I don't recall the name, no.
Mike Chat was, he was the blue Power Ranger in the Lightspeed Rescue TV series. I know, right? And Mike Chat was the guy that took what was like, oh, it'd be so cool if you know this name. Do you know the name Ernie Reyes?
Possibly.
So Ernie Reyes was like OG, put like musical forms. Before people even knew what musical forms were, Ernie Reyes had it was called the West Coast Action Team. And they were like, oh, mate, YouTube it. It's so cool. Like the video quality would be terrible. And like, do you know what I mean? But Mike Chat took what was unregulated and not teachable or difficult to teach, no structure, and he made it into a program. And the guys I used to teach martial arts with got Mike Chat over to this country. He came and did seminars with us, and we were one of the first people, or well, not we, back then we were one of the first martial arts schools in the country to have XMA as a program that people could join and be coached through, like chop punch, do you know what I mean? And all that kind of stuff. That's cool that you know who Chloe Bruce is.
But that's what I did with calisthenics. People were saying, how do you do a flag? How do you do front lever? How do these things even work? Yeah. I broke them down, created progression routes, created programs, and I created a calisthenics certification so that instructors can learn how to teach it. And it was the first one in the world that was accredited by the fitness industry. So you actually get points and certification for it. So this is what I'm saying. You can modularize any type of movement as long as you understand it well enough biomechanically and you understand how to progress towards it. And with Chloe Bruce, like I said, the reason she can do those machine gun kicks the way she can is because she can stay upright. She's got the mobility. But at the same time, we need to also distinguish between the ability to execute good technique and form under controlled conditions and the ability to play or do a sport. So just because Chloe Bruce is great at machine gun kicks doesn't necessarily mean she's good at fighting.
Of course.
Right? So I don't know if she is or not. I don't know if she competes, but I'm just saying, so I'm saying if you are a competitive fighter, you need to up your mobility so that you can pull off your techniques more efficiently and better. But if you are a performer, then it would also be better for your overall development to be able to use the things that you do in your performance in real life situations in function, because then you would be able to actually become more skilled at a craft other than just showing off how much mobility you have, if that makes sense. So there's one real quick thing that I want to say that is happening at the moment. Mobility is the new trend of 2020, 2019. It's the new buzzword. Everything always has its time. And a lot of people are using this word incorrectly, showing compound bodyweight movements, saying this is going to increase your mobility. No, it isn't. Anything that is not articulated and isolated and focused into one joint at a time is not going to improve your mobility because it has the potential for compensation.
Okay.
So if you're doing a downwards dog, there are so many different joints working, you cannot put enough effort into one joint to improve it, because the other joints which are better will take over the strain.
Yeah.
Right? So mobility is not compound. Mobility work is articulated, isolated into one area. So that's really being misunderstood right now.
Okay.
But second of all, there are a whole bunch of mobility coaches who are very, very good at teaching mobility, who don't do anything with it. Like, oh yeah, I've got really good internal hip rotation. Look what I can do with my hip. And it's like, well, show me a side kick then. Well, I don't know how to do a side kick. Yeah, because you're doing a sport. You have no function for what you're doing. So
Okay.
you're preaching developing the body for no purpose, which is also a waste of time, because if you don't need it, you don't need it.
Mm-hmm.
So if a client comes into me, I don't say to them, right, you need this, you haven't got that. The first thing I ask is, what is it you do and what is it you want to do? And then I will assess you for your readiness for that. And we go from there.
That's cool, man. I like those two distinctions. Yeah, well worth you making that point. Like, really cool. Because I think like that's one thing I've had a little mini epiphany with lately is, why are you doing what you're doing? Because the goal of why you're doing what you're doing is important. So I had like this little, I enjoy doing some bro reps, you know what I mean? And bro reps are a big part of my home training, since I've missing out on so many different things. But I was like, why do I enjoy doing it? It's like, well, I enjoy doing A, B, C, D, E because of the outcome. Then the thing is, if I feel like I'm not getting the outcome, what I'm doing becomes less enjoyable. So I'm trying to concentrate on enjoying the process. So it's important. For me, that was an important distinction, understanding what my goal was, and then understanding, well, can I still enjoy the process if the goal feels like it's taking longer to get? Do you know what I mean? I'm conscious that you and I have got less than 10 minutes left to discuss what we can kind of like, and there's so much more that I could discuss with you, which is cool. Like, I like finishing a podcast thinking, wow, a round 2 would be so easy to manage. So
time flies.
What I wanted to sort of give you an opportunity to do, and it ties in with literally the thought I asked us to hold before I press record. You said that you personally don't want to see, oh, here's a glute bridge and here's a push-up, because you're excited about what's new and what's exciting and what's on the fringes and what's going to kind of shape human movement moving forwards. What are the things that you're excited about? 2020 is obviously a difficult year for everybody, and it's only going to become more difficult, I think, over the next few months. But what are you retaining excitement for? What have you got coming up that you want to discuss, if anything?
The limitations of the human body are yet to be discovered. So I'm just interested in watching people at the forefront of their sports pressing the boundaries. I'm interested in expression. So I like, dance, art, things like that, or things that, not entertainment, but performance that involves a high level of skill and that involves some kind of unique style to it that interests me. But also in terms of personally, I'm just trying to become the best I can. Like, I don't want to do everything, but there's certain things that I'm really interested in. I want to maximize all my ranges of motion and put strength into them. So I don't know if you know what a Cossack squat is.
I do.
So I do Cossacks. I'm 72 kilos. I do Cossack squats with 80 kilos loaded on a bar on my back. So I'm talking about taking my body to its maximum range and producing strength and control in that range. And then I want to show people what you can do with a body like that. But then there's also the principle of training the mind, meditation, spirituality. And one area I'm interested in, sports science-wise, fascia and connective tissue. Well, fascia is now considered the structural organ.
Okay.
And the research that's going into that is very, very detailed. And I'd like to get involved in writing some papers in some journals on that. So I'm going to try and get connected with some scientists. And in terms of where the world's going, I mean, we're going to start having biorobotics soon. People are going to have robotic legs that respond to the nervous system. They already have these things. Arms. So it will only be so long.
Robocop.
Yeah, of course. 1,000%. Give it 10 to 20 years, it will be done.
Wow.
But so there'll be someone who's willing to have their head transposed onto a robot, bit by bit. There'll be someone, of course.
I don't know why I'm sure, because of course there will.
Yeah, I mean, aside from all of the concerns that brings up about robots taking over the world and stuff, Terminator style.
Skynet, mate.
Skynet. But what interests me is once you can get maybe 2 limbs, like the legs, replaced with bionic limbs, we as humans will want to test the limits of that. And then there will be games, Olympic games for biorobotics or biomechanical, biorobotic limbs. So I'd be interested to see Usain Bolt race someone with robo limbs. I'd just be interested, because I don't believe overall that the human body is the most advanced technology that we know in the universe.
Yeah.
The most advanced natural technology in the universe is the human body and the brain, and its ability to evolve against pressure in one lifetime, and its ability to manifest thought and all the powers that the human being has. I don't believe robots can beat that, especially when it comes to things like willpower. You know how long someone can go on for when their heart is in it, compared to a robot that just runs out of energy. So I'm really interested in what kind of questions and things that's going to throw up. So that's some kind of forward-thinking stuff. But
yeah, I wasn't expecting that as an answer. Not going to lie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool, mate. 100%. There's so many more things that I could discuss with you. Not very often have I felt the limitations of having a conversation over a video platform, whereas so many more things I could have asked you and so many more things you could have shown me if this was an in-person conversation. Do you know what I mean? If the whole country was on lockdown, and then again, if it wasn't, you'd probably still be in Bali. So we'll, fingers crossed, the country reaches a new level of normality over the next few months, and maybe there's an opportunity for you and I to hook up in person maybe later on in 2020. That would be amazing to do. In terms of you mentioned, of course, about doing individual coaching. Are you still running individual coaching remotely and virtually with everything that's going on with coronavirus?
I am with a few people. I mean, I'm not promoting it because I don't want to be inundated with it right now. I'm also making use of the downtime to regroup and reorganize. I've just got back from traveling for 3 months. So I also want a bit of time just to reorganize myself and set my new calendar of workshops and think about what I'm doing for the next 6 months.
Cool.
But I do have a few online clients at the moment. And if anybody really, really does want to train with me, hit me up and we can sort something out. I can at least sort you out an online program that you can follow. And depending on what you need, then I might online coach you. But just approach me. It's no problem. Hit me up on Instagram.
Which
Official. Rick's Official, RIX.official. Cool. Then you can also go to my website, bodyweightgurus.com, and you can hit me up through there as well.
Amazing. Cool. Rick, perfect place to end, mate. Thank you so much for taking the time out to chat with me. I've thoroughly enjoyed being educated, talking to you about what we've discussed today. Appreciate your excitement and your passion and enthusiasm for what it is that you discuss, and it's the kind of thing I love to talk to people about. So again, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me, bro. It was fun, man. We'll do it again.